Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to talk through this issue of identifying consecutive fifths and octaves. You might know these as consecutive fifths and octaves, or you might know them as parallel fifths and octaves. It's exactly the same thing. So first of all, what are we talking about? Consecutive fifths, consecutive octaves, parallel fifths, parallel octaves? We're talking about this. Between one chord and the next chord in a piece of music, particularly when we're writing in four-part harmony, there are various rules of engagement, if you like. I don't particularly like thinking of them as rules, more as advisory, really. And they've been kind of drawn up by theorists who've looked back at the great music of the past and said, you know what, great composers tend to avoid these situations because if you avoid those, the music normally sounds better. So this is sort of in that category, and it means this: between one chord and the next chord, you shouldn't have a perfect fifth or a perfect octave between two parts that then is followed by another perfect fifth or a perfect octave between the same pair of parts. So let's just think about that for a moment. Say in my first chord, I've got G in the soprano part and C in the alto part. And then when we move on to the next chord, those two notes move up one. So I've got A in the soprano part and D in the alto part. Well, in the first chord, C to G is a perfect fifth. Second chord, D to A is also a perfect fifth. So they would be called consecutive fifths or parallel fifths. Now, if I for some reason was going to use a perfect fifth followed by, say, a diminished fifth, that would be okay. Sounds a bit strange, but it technically would be okay because one's a perfect fifth and one's a different kind of fifth. It's a diminished fifth in that case. So they would both have to be perfect fifths, but it could happen between the soprano and the alto going from one chord to the next, or the soprano and the tenor going from one chord to the next, or the soprano and the bass going from one chord to the next, or the alto and the tenor going from one chord to the next, or the alto and the bass going from one chord to the next, or the tenor and the bass going from one chord to the next. So in other words, any pair of parts that progresses from one chord to the next using a perfect fifth followed by a perfect fifth, or a perfect octave followed by a perfect octave, they would be considered to be consecutives or parallels, and we're advised to avoid using them. So if you're writing a piece of harmony for a music exam, you definitely want to avoid these things when you're writing in four-part harmony. But it's not just exams. If you're writing a piece of music in four-part harmony, often you get consecutives because the whole thing is moving by step in the same direction, or the whole thing is leaping by the same amount in the same direction. And that usually makes for slightly less successful, slightly less independent writing than if we try to avoid doing that. So one thing you can try and do is get a bit of contramotion between the top and the bottom, the soprano and the bass part. You can't do that all the time, but if you're writing in contramotion in an opposite direction like this, well, the chances of avoiding those consecutives are vastly improved. But as soon as you see and hear everything moving in the same direction by the same distance, you're almost guaranteed to bump into consecutives pretty quickly. So what happens if you've written a piece of music, or you've, say, done a harmony exercise preparing for a music exam or something, and you want to check these consecutive fifths and octaves? You know, so often people tell me when they've done these things that they have checked them, and then when we look over it, we discover that there are quite a number of consecutive fifths and octaves. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that you have to be really systematic about doing this. So when you've written something, the best thing to do is to start at the top: soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Think of it: soprano, alto, tenor, bass as the four parts in your four-part harmony exercise. Start at the top with soprano. Check every interval between the soprano and the alto. What's happening between the first one and the second one, and the second one to the third one? comb through the whole piece, and you get quite quick at recognizing intervals. So if you see a fifth, well, just pause for thought and think, now, is that a perfect fifth? Is it followed by another perfect fifth? If you're looking at other intervals and you think, well, that's a third, that's a sixth, well, you don't have to worry about it. You know you're okay. But if you see a fifth followed by a fifth, stop and check. Are they both perfect fifths? Because if they are, they're consecutive or parallel. Or are they octaves? Because if they're perfect octaves, again, they're consecutive or parallel. So be really systematic. Start with the soprano, check it against the next part down, the alto part. When you've done that, go back to the beginning, check the soprano against the next part down, the tenor part. When you've done that, back to the beginning, check the soprano against the bottom part, the bass part. Okay, you've now checked the soprano part against each of the lower three parts. Go back to the next highest part, the alto part, check the alto part against the tenor part. When you've done that, check the alto part against the bass part. Okay, you've now checked the alto part against those lower parts. Go back to the next highest part, the tenor part, check the tenor part against the bass part. You've now checked all the possibilities. Okay, well, the best thing to do is to put this into practice. So I've purposely written a piece of music that's got quite a lot of consecutive fifths and octaves in it, which you can now see on the screen. And we're going to go through and see if we can spot these. It's funny, actually, after a while of doing this, they'll start to jump out of the page at you. But, you know, until you get used to doing it, they're probably less obvious. But, you know, if you look at this, for example, and you look at the first chord and then the second chord, this is a great example of what I was talking about a few moments ago. All the notes from the first chord all move up one when you go to the second chord. Now, the chances of there being consecutives there are pretty strong. All four parts moving in the same direction by the same interval. So it's not about have I used the right chords, but it is much more about have I got the distribution of parts organized? Because if they're all going in the same direction, it spells trouble, really. So you might solve it by changing one of the chords, or you might think, well, there's a way of kind of rewriting the parts so we haven't got everybody just sliding up a note like that. But let's do this systematic thing. If we check through the soprano and the alto parts, we get this. 6, 6, 4th, 6, 5th. Oh, now that's the first time I've come across a fifth, so I'm stopping now. This is bar 2, measure 2. Perfect fifth from B up to F sharp, followed by a perfect fifth from A up to E. So that constitutes consecutive fifths or parallel fifths. So we need to do something about changing those. Okay, well, let's go on. The next chord is okay because that's a 6. Bar 3 or measure 3. Oh, there's a perfect fifth. A to E, perfect fifth, followed by B to F sharp. Oh, that's a perfect fifth. So the first two beats of bar 3 are giving me consecutive fifths. So I'm going to need to change that. I might need to change at the alto note, say. I could maybe take the alto down to F sharp on that second chord. That would fix it. Or I might decide to change the chord. But you see, as soon as the alto part's moving in a different direction, I can get away from it. So there's no problem about writing a perfect fifth. What you mustn't do is write two perfect fifths next door to each other when they're moving. So you've got perfect fifths there. 6. Oh, another fifth at the end of bar 3. So let's check this out. Don't forget to check across bar lines. Sometimes people forget to do that. So end of bar 3, perfect fifth. Beginning of bar 4, another perfect fifth. So they're consecutive fifths. So you'd again have to rewrite something there. Again, you could take the alto down to F sharp or something on that first chord to solve it, but it's perfect fifths, so that's consecutive. Now in bar 4, I've purposely included something just to make this clear. In bar 4, you've got a perfect fifth followed by a perfect fifth. So surely they're consecutive. Well, in this case, they're not, because you're repeating the same note. So for them to be consecutive fifths, they have to move from one perfect fifth to a different perfect fifth. But if you're repeating the same perfect fifth, that's not deemed to be consecutive. So that's perfectly okay. Then there's a fourth to finish. So we've seen some consecutives between the soprano and the alto. Okay, soprano and tenor. Well, okay, it's a fourth. It's more than an octave, so it's a compound fourth, but it's a fourth. Fourth. Oh, there's an octave on the third beat. But it's not a consecutive octave because that's an octave and then it moves on to a fourth. So that's okay. Third, third, fourth, okay. Third, third, fourth, third, 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 sixth. Oh, so actually we've done quite well, haven't we? We had all that trouble between the soprano and the alto, but between the soprano and the tenor, life is looking pretty good. Okay, soprano and bass. 2 Ds. So, okay, they're 2 octaves apart, but it's still something to do with octaves, isn't it? A perfect octave. Oh dear. Moving on to another perfect octave. So it doesn't matter they're 2 octaves apart, 3 octaves apart, 1 octave apart, it's still some kind of octave. So octave D, octave E. We're going to have to change that, aren't we? Because they're consecutive or parallel. 6. Oh, here's an octave at the end of bar 1, but it's okay because it's followed by a 5th. So going from an octave to a 5th, that's fine. Now what's happening in bar 2? I've got a 5th followed by a 5th. Perfect 5th, perfect 5th. So they're consecutive 5ths. So I'm going to have to change something there between the soprano and the bass. Oh, that's an octave, but that's okay because that's an octave, but the next one is a 5th. So not another octave. Okay, beginning of bar 3, that's a 5th. Oh, moving on to another 5th. So perfect 5th followed by a perfect 5th. Going to have to change something there, aren't I? Because we've got consecutive or parallel 5ths. Oh, here's an octave. Oh, but it's okay because it's not followed by an octave. Oh, it is followed by a 5th. So it's okay to have an octave followed by a 5th, as long as you haven't got 2 5ths next to each other or 2 octaves next to each other. So end of bar 3. There's a 5th, it's a perfect 5th. Ooh, going into bar 4, there's another perfect 5th. So consecutive 5ths going across the bar line. And then we've got 2 5ths in the last bar, haven't we? But remember, it's the same as that situation we had with the alto. They're the same notes, so they're not counted as consecutive or parallel. Then an octave to finish, but it's not next to another octave, so that's okay. So various things to fix there, aren't there, between the soprano and the bass part there. Okay, let's go back and now we'll look at the alto and the tenor part. 6, 6, 5th, 6, 6, 6, 6. Oh, it's looking good, isn't it? 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, third. Absolutely no trouble at all there between the alto and the tenor part, so that's a blessing. Alto and bass part. 3rd, 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 3rd. Oh, looking good. Into bar 2, octave, followed by octave. So perfect octave, they're consecutive. So we'll have to change something there. Okay, 3rd, that's good. Into bar 3, octave, it's a perfect octave, followed by another perfect octave. So consecutive octaves, we're going to need to fix them, I'm afraid. 3rd's okay. End of bar 3, another perfect octave, going into bar 4. Oh dear, another perfect octave. So we'll have to fix that going over the bar line there. Then we've got the repeated octave, but remember it's okay because it's repeated. And then a 5th at the end, but that's okay because it's not next to another 5th. So that's okay. Okay, so let's now look at the tenor and the bass. Well, bar 1, perfect 5th, perfect 5th. Straight away, consecutive 5th, so we need to change something there. 6, 5th, but it's not next to another 5th. Phew. 3rd, 3rd, 5th. There's another 5th, but it's not next to another 5th, so that's good. 3rd, 3rd, 5th, but it's not next to another 5th, that's good. 3rd, 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 compound 3rd. Oh, so actually that's not so bad. But now we've identified all of those consecutive 5ths and octaves, we now need to change those so that we don't get those consecutives. Now, does the piece sound bad if it's full of consecutive 5ths and octaves? Well, it won't sound bad if all the notes belong to chords. And all these notes do belong to chords. So you're going to start off by choosing chords that fit with the melody notes, if that's where you're starting, or the bass notes, if that's where you're starting. So it's going to sound all right. And I've purposely written this to sound as okay as it can, taken that it's got those consecutives. But actually, if you live with that piece, you'll become sort of slightly irritated by those things like fifths at the beginning, octaves at the beginning, those chords going in parallel motion. So, you know, you might decide, well, actually, if I went from chord 1 to chord 5, sounds better because I haven't got those consecutives. So the consecutives, you know, 1 to 5, oh, no consecutives. So it sort of sounds better, doesn't it? So if you start to either change the chord or redistribute the notes to flush out those consecutives, it will always sound better. So choose chords that work, that's your starting point. But once you've got them, then check through for the implications of these consecutives. And what I've just tried to show you there is a piece of music that's got consecutives in it and how to check the piece so we don't miss any of those consecutives, so we know what needs fixing. So I hope that's a useful exploration of identifying these consecutive fifths and octaves, what they are, how to spot them, and then knowing where you need to just put things right. If you're working in more than 4 parts, well, this becomes a bit more flexible. So it's something particular to 4-part writing. On the other hand, it's quite often a good idea to avoid getting into consecutives unless you're writing a piece that is really making a feature. I mean, if you want to write a piece in consecutive fifths, well, fine, that's okay. That's part of the character of the piece. You've made it a feature of the piece. But if you just get odd consecutive fifths and octaves bobbing up during the course of something, particularly in 4 parts, it tends to be a result that's less good than writing without them. There we are. So I hope that's helpful, and good luck spotting your consecutive fifths and octaves, and even more luck fixing them. Now, if you want to know more about all this stuff and go into more detail on your writing of harmony and so on, you might want to go to our website at www.mmcourses.co.uk, where you can click on courses. You'll find courses like our advanced theory course that's really going to go into much more detail on this stuff. You'll find courses on counterpoint that might be helpful. You'll find courses on keyboard harmony that will get you really going with this stuff under the fingers. You'll find courses on oral dictation, which is really about, can I hear what I'm writing or what I'm looking at on the page? So all those things are going to empower you a lot further. So if this has whetted your appetite to kind of go a bit deeper, then have a look on the website, click on those courses and see what you can find that might help you to make that journey. And you might also, while you're on the website, on the homepage, click on Maestros, which will tell you about being a maestro. And we've got 3 levels of maestro. Maestro 1 comes with some benefits, and it's also a kind of support level. So you can just help us with a small monthly contribution to keep this channel going, to keep it growing, to supplying all these videos that we try to put on the channel. If you want to go up to level 2, you can also get all sorts of perks, and level 3, further perks, so you get discounts on courses, all this kind of stuff. But also level 2 and level 3 gives you access to our monthly live streams, where we kind of really get into some detail on the work of a particular composer or other musical issues. We try to answer any questions that you want to raise or any requests for topics. There's a live chat running. You can contribute to that if you want to. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. You can ask your questions. You can comment on what we're doing. And in the level 3 group, there's the opportunity for composers, people writing harmony exercises and so on, to submit their work, for performers to submit recordings of their playing. And I'll give you individual feedback and evaluation of that. We can all kind of share in that. And most people in the group are finding it such a beneficial thing, really, to get some individual feedback and to see and hear what other people are doing, and to see what the kind of feedback to them might be, and that's inspiring them to develop their own skills. Very supportive community of like-minded musicians, lots of lovely people there, and you can play as active a role or not as you wish. So have a look at the courses and at Maestros, see if there's anything helpful to you there.